Hello, and welcome to part 5 of our series on Pranayama, on breath control. Part 1, we looked at diaphragmatic breathing, foundation. Part 2, we looked at the complete breath and the complete back breath. In part 3, we looked at a couple of exotic breathing patterns that are actually fairly common in yoga studios. Breath of fire, alternate nostril breathing, and how to use those as a lead into balance, masculine, feminine, and lead into meditation. In the last workshop, we looked at pattern breath or cycle breathing, and we took one of the most common cycle patterns, 4-16-8, breathing in for 4, holding for 16, exhaling for 8. Okay. In part 5, we're going to come back to the beginning. We're going to take a look at a breathing pattern, sometimes called detached observation. This is one of my favorite patterns. And to start with, let's do a little background on this breathing pattern. One of my favorite authors is J. Krishnamurti. And Krishnamurti was a prolific author, although he didn't really write anything. He talked and people wrote down what he said. And one of the things that he advocated for meditation was detached observation. So as Krishnamurti outlined it, there are 3 rules, or 3 steps. The first step is let go of control. Okay. Now he was talking about meditation, so when he said let go of control, what he was talking about is letting the mind go wherever it wants to go. Do whatever it wants to do. Step 1. Step 2, pay attention. Okay. Quite often the only time our mind is free to wander is when we aren't paying attention. So the question is, can you pay attention and still let the mind wander? Step 3, don't judge. Okay. No matter what the mind does, no matter where it goes, just stay with it, present, open, accepting, without judgment. So it's a very simple type of meditation, but incredibly powerful. I was surprised years later to come across the exact same principles in a communication workshop. When learning how to listen to another person in communication, in a conversation, what are the basic rules? Well, first, try not to dominate the conversation. Okay? Listen. Pay attention. And don't judge. Okay? Those are the foundation for good learning, for good listening, for good communication. Let go of control, pay attention, don't judge. When you treat other people in this manner, you'll be amazed at the quality of conversations that build from that level of trust and from good listening skills. A few years later, I came across the same recipe in a book by Janine Roth called Feeding the Hungry Heart. She was working specifically with people with eating disorders and primarily compulsive eating problems. But her message immediately sounded familiar to me. Her strategy for working with people with compulsive eating patterns was, step 1, let go of control. Give yourself permission to eat as much of whatever you want whenever you want it. Okay? Step 2, pay attention. And she specifically meant by that to take the time to figure out what you're eating, why you're eating it, why you need it. What is the driving force behind your need to eat? And then eat without judgment. Okay? Let go of control, pay attention, don't judge. Imagine an athlete and what a sports psychologist might tell the athlete when they're competing. Do they really want to be trying to control their performance? Do they really want to be daydreaming, mind wandering? Do they really want to be judging and critiquing themselves as they're performing? And obviously in the sports arena we can see quite quickly that all 3 of those patterns are disabling. In fact, they're what prevent the athlete from performing, or the musician from being able to lose themselves in the music. Let go of control, pay attention, don't judge. If you boil it down a little bit deeper, you'll find that this is a recipe for being in the present moment. Okay? When we are trying to control and when we're judging, we are in effect anchored in past and future. The idea of controlling, to what end? You have to have an idea of what it should look like, which is judgment. You have to have this saying of this is what I want and this is where I am and how do I get there. All of this is about achieving something in the future, which is antithetical to performance, which is a present moment experience. To the degree that any part of you is thinking about past or future, you aren't in the present moment. So, does that mean that this idea of judging and striving and controlling is bad? No, not at all. It's a different phase in the cycle, in the growth of a human being. Before we can perform, what do we have to do? Before we can perform, we first have to practice. And what's the attribute of practicing? It's having a clear idea of where you're going, measuring what is against what should be, okay? And then controlling, adjusting. Okay? So in the practice phase, it's all about control and judgment, having a clear idea of where you're going. Fantastic. However, in performance phase, when you make that shift, in practice and performance are oil and water. They don't mix. You have to be able to throw that switch, let go, step out of the practice mode and step into performance mode. And they're opposites. In performance, I'm not thinking about the future or the past. I'm not holding this idea of what should be and comparing what is to what should be and then judging what is. In performance mode, I surrender, I let go. Okay? But on the other hand, great athletes will tell you that they aren't daydreaming, they aren't wandering. When they are in that performance mode, there is tremendous present moment awareness. It's the awareness without the judging, without the control. There's a sense of being in flow with the universe, of letting go. So how do we take this basic recipe that we see in meditation, we see it again in eating disorder work, we see it again with athletes, we see it in all these different areas of our lives. How do we apply this to the breath? And so the secret is we follow the same strategy. You let go of control, which means letting the body breathe the way it wants to breathe. But we pay attention. We don't let the mind wander. And then while we're breathing with awareness, we don't judge. This can be tricky, especially for a yoga teacher. For instance, if I'm starting to breathe in and my body wants to open my mouth and breathe in through the mouth, one of two things will probably happen for most yoga teachers. A, they'll suppress and they'll keep breathing through their nose. In other words, they don't let go of control, they stay in control. Or B, they allow the body to breathe through the mouth, but in their mind they're thinking that's not right. That was a mouth breath. They judge it as being somehow inferior to a nasal breath. So, if your body wants to stop, breathe shallow, breathe into the clavicle. You allow the body to breathe exactly how it wants to breathe. Fast, slow, starting, stopping. And the whole time you pay attention and you do so without judging. Now finally, this idea of paying attention without judging, without interfering, without controlling, is actually impossible. From a physics point of view, we have the idea of Schrodinger's cat, the thought experiment. But from a more practical level, imagine that you have your parent, you have a 7-year-old daughter, and your daughter and her best friend are upstairs and they're in their bedroom and they're laughing and they're giggling and they're having a wonderful time. So as a parent, you become curious and you want to just see what's going on in the bedroom. So very quietly you open the door and you stick your head in. Okay? Now, even though you aren't making any noise, you aren't making any big waves, as soon as the children realize that you're observing them, what happens to their play? And this is the great irony. A parent will never know who their child is in the absence of the parent. All we can ever know about anything is our relationship to it. Now, does that mean that we shouldn't even try when the goal is impossible? And of course the answer is no. Just because it's impossible doesn't mean that we can't be better or worse at something. Imagine a father who's bought his son a train set, and as his son begins to open up the packaging and begins to put it together and begins to play with it, the father takes over. No, that's wrong. No, trains run this way. They don't do that. And the kid gets smothered. Compare another parent who gives the kid complete freedom to do anything they want because the parent is oblivious, not present, not aware, not conscious. And at both extremes, the relationship suffers between the child and the parent. Okay? So if you have those two extremes at one end, the parent that is oblivious, that doesn't pay attention, and the parent who pays attention but controls. And then at the other end, imagine a parent who takes their kid to the park and then sits down on a bench, and their kid runs off over to the monkey bars, and the parent opens up a magazine and begins to read the magazine. But out of the corner of their eye, they're still observing the child from a distance, in such a way that the child doesn't really feel like they're being observed. Okay? And that is how we practice detached observation. We witness the breath out of the corner of our eye from a great distance without judging, just paying attention without controlling. Let's give it a try, and then I'll give you some strategies for improving. So sitting quietly, close your eyes, bring your attention to your breathing. And then notice your breath. If your mind wanders, come back to the breath. Give your body permission to breathe any way it wants to. Without judgment. If the breath speeds up or slows down or stops or starts or moves into the wrong area of the lungs, let go of those judgments. Pay attention. Then open your eyes. So we're going to try this again. This time we're going to use a little trick to try and help us to pay more attention. It sometimes is a problem where when we're practicing detached observation, our mind wanders and we aren't conscious. We lose that sharp focus. So we're going to practice it again for about the same amount of time, but afterwards I'm going to ask you questions about your breath. And knowing that, I want you to see if you can pay attention in such a way that you can answer those questions. Okay? When you're ready, close your eyes and begin. And then opening your eyes. So just to kind of get a sense for yourself of how much you were paying attention or how little, just see how much can you remember about your breathing in the past minute. Where did the breath start? Did it start in the chest or the back or the collarbones or the belly or the ribs? Where did it move to next? Did you breathe into more than one area, or were you breathing into all the areas of your lungs? Were you breathing in smoothly, or were there some stutters in the inhale or the exhale? Did you hold the breath at the bottom? And if you did, was there tension or was it soft? Did you hold at the top? Was the transition sharp or soft? Was the inhale longer or shorter than the exhale? Was your left nostril more open than your right nostril? Close your eyes. This time, really pay attention to your breathing. Let go of control. Let the body breathe the way it wants to breathe. When you let go of control, how does the body breathe in your absence? And then open your eyes. So the learning how to pay attention can be challenging for a lot of people. Control is challenging for a lot of other people. Okay? So there are a couple of ways we can begin to really notice how and when we control and interfere. And the two primary ways, although we can interfere with any part of the breath process, but the two most tricky positions are the very top of the breath and at the very bottom of the breath. So at the top of the breath, quite often people will hold or they'll make the transition, and what we want is a moment of letting go of control. So it's a perfect opportunity to practice surrender. You breathe in and you let go. And what you'll notice is usually the body immediately breathes out. Okay? It requires interference, effort to prevent it from doing that. Not always. For instance, if I yawn, my body may pause at the top because it chooses to. So it's not a universal, but generally speaking, if I breathe in and I'm not interfering, the body will start to breathe out. Try that a few times. Breathe in and then really let go and allow the body to breathe out in exactly the way it wants to. The second point, and the one that is more troublesome for most people, is at the bottom. As we exhale, it's very difficult not to interfere. If we're paying attention to our breathing, we usually interfere at this moment, and that is the choice of when to breathe in again. So we breathe out, and then somehow up here, we decide to breathe in again. So the question is, can I breathe out and just float and allow the body to breathe in when it chooses to, rather than me, rather than my mind choosing to breathe in again? So to start with, it may be a little bit rough around the edges, but you breathe out and then you relax and then you wait. One of two things will happen. Sooner or later, your body will breathe in all by itself without you telling it to, or you'll die. Okay? And I'm willing to bet that your body will choose to breathe in again. Now, when it chooses to breathe in, notice how effortless or how wrenching that is. And that'll tell you how much you were interfering. We can interfere in two ways, by initiating the inhale, or we can interfere by preventing the inhalation. So I breathe out, I float. Sooner or later the body will breathe in. And when it breathes in, is it effortless? Or was I resisting the inhale and did the body have to break free from that resistance? So for the next few breaths, pay attention to the bottom, surrender, float at the bottom, and then witness the body choosing to breathe in again. Close your eyes and beginning. Now put the two together. Breathe in, and then like throwing a ball in the air and letting go, the ball will keep rising a little bit, it floats, and then it falls away. So as I breathe in, I just let go, the body keeps breathing in a little bit, floats, falls away. At the bottom, I pay attention without interfering and allow the body to breathe in when it wishes to. Okay. Close your eyes. 5 or 10 or 15 breaths. And then open your eyes. Now, the third area that people have trouble with is judgment. Okay? And for some people, this is going to be the hardest part of detached observation. Can you pay attention? Can you let go of control, pay attention, and then when your body doesn't do what you think it should, do you get distracted by that? And if you do you start judging and or you start interfering, trying to control the breath to make it what it should be? Okay? Or do you lose interest? Does your mind wander off? You stop paying attention rather than paying attention to what you perceive as being negative. So, think about how you might spend an afternoon sitting by the ocean, watching ocean waves. Now, as you watch an ocean wave, or watch the ocean, if you watch long enough, you'll notice that sometimes the ocean becomes almost flat. Sometimes a wave is big. Sometimes there's 3 big waves, and then a few small waves, and then almost nothing. Okay. If you watch long enough, you'll realize that no 2 waves are ever the same. Every single wave is different. And yet, if I showed you any 2 waves, you wouldn't be able to argue, well, that's not a wave. That doesn't look like a wave. Every wave is different, and yet every wave somehow is absolutely perfect in its waviness. So that is how we want to observe the breath. The same way a child might watch clouds floating through the sky. Not saying, oh, that one's floating too fast or too slow. Not saying, I don't like that cloud, it looks like a dog, I want it to look like a cat. Not trying to make the cloud change its shape, just observing without interfering, without any attempt to interfere, and without any judgment. Okay? So let's try one last time. Close your eyes. Now, watching your breath the way a parent might watch their child across the playground, or the way someone might sit by the beach, looking out to sea, observing the waves without interfering, without judging. Now notice how you feel. Especially notice your relationship to your own breath. This is my favorite pranayama, detached observation, witnessing the body breathe without interfering, without judging. At one level, this exercise is almost impossible. I still catch myself interfering with the breath. Maybe not in big ways, maybe in very subtle ways that I didn't even notice before. But as I pay more and more attention, I notice the subtle ways that I interfere with the breathing, and I let go of those. I also still find myself occasionally judging. For instance, if I snatch a breath into the upper chest, or I'll find myself realizing that I'm interfering in a very subtle way and then judging myself for interfering in that subtle way. And then occasionally I realize what I'm doing and I let it go. And I drop back into that performance mode, being in the zone, in flow with the breath. Anything that you can pay attention to with 100% focus. In yoga we call it dharana. Sixth limb of yoga, pure concentration. Anything that I can engage with in dharana becomes amazing. Not only does performance improve, but more importantly, the internal experience is amazing, satisfying somehow at a very spiritual, organic level. It feels right. When you have a flow experience, you know instinctively that you want more of this, that you need this state of mind in your life. Now, to tie it all together, let's come back to this idea of performance versus practice. So the first 4 workshops was all about control. Control your breathing, the rhythm of your breathing. Okay? Alternate nostril. Breathing with your chest, with your abdomen, with your complete back breath. Control, control, control. But all of that control, just like an athlete who practices, is in service to performance. All the hours that the pianist spends at home in their living room practicing is all in support for when they let go of control and they allow that inner spirit to come through them, through the music, or in our case, through the breath. So I don't want to say that the practicing, I don't want to give the impression that the practicing is inferior. We need the practice in order to improve the performance, to deepen the internal focus and experience of our performance. I'd like to thank you for joining me. If you would like to stick around, we'll be doing an asana class, and in the asana class we'll be focusing on this idea of detached observation of breath while practicing yoga. Thank you. Namaste.